Member for Euroa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I also rise this morning to speak on the report into the 1920 budget estimates, which was tabled by PAAC in October last year. But specifically, I wish to reference page 143, which gives an overview of the roles of the Department of Justice and Regulation, including the management of metropolitan and country fire brigades. And that's the area that I wish to focus my contribution on this morning. Because in less than 2 weeks' time, the so-called fire services reform, and I note the former Emergency Services Minister is in the House, that so-called reform is being pushed through by those opposite, it will fundamentally alter the landscape of emergency services in this state. And, Deputy Speaker, volunteers' worst fears are being realised as part of that. We now know that the CFA is not going to be a volunteer-only service, as Labor repeatedly claimed. Several weeks ago, the restructure model was released and volunteers have been excluded from participating in those discussions. That restructure model shows that the CFA will have to second 229 Fire Rescue Victoria staff to run most of the CFA operations, including 96 commanders, 40 assistant chief fire officers, 6 community safety officers, plus 87 instructors and supervisors. And last week, Adam Barnett, the head of the Victorian Volunteer Fire Brigades Victoria, the peak body that represents volunteers, he wrote to volunteers and detailed an extensive list of the promises that Labor has made and has broken. And I will make that document available to the House Speaker, because in the time given to me, I can't canvass all of those concerns. But chief among them is the fact that this government has not consulted with volunteers on this restructure. And why should we be surprised? These are the same people who put their lives on the line through the summer bushfires. They're the same people that the government is happy to praise. They are happy to stand alongside for a media stunt during an event like the summer bushfires, when they're out there saving people's homes and saving people's properties, but they will just throw them under the bus when they think the media aren't watching. They do not give a toss about the future of those men and women who serve in the state's fire services. And outside the heat of the summer bushfire season, they treat them like dirt on their shoes. What is happening right now is a complete and utter disgrace. And I quote this from Adam Barnett directly. "The most disappointing aspect is that we have repeatedly warned government and the agencies that should any volunteer promises or commitments be broken, this will represent a deep betrayal of volunteer trust. We have warned these actions risk breaking the hearts and backs of stalwart CFA volunteers who, despite their reservations, put their bitterness and rancour to one side and gave the government the benefit of the doubt. For many, this may well be the last straw. Parliamentarians and decision makers not only risk losing the confidence of volunteers, but also risk their own reputations. How will trust in these people ever be rebuilt in the face of such intransigence?" Now, Deputy Speaker, despite the assurance that was given by the government, we now know that those staff that get seconded back to the CFA will be wearing FRV uniforms. We now know that with less than 2 weeks to go before these reforms are actually implemented, volunteers still have not seen and have not been consulted on the joint operating procedures or the joint agency arrangements that are going to apply. Deputy Speaker, this week a number of MPs had a volunteer from the Toolamba Fire Brigade, a volunteer for 24 years, write to us to tell us that he is now officially resigning. He says, "I will be resigning from the CFA after 24 years, cancelling the 7 or 8 positions I hold in the organisation, ranging from brigade secretary, strike team leader, volunteer trainer or assessor, burn controller, delegate to the state committee and others. Most importantly, I will no longer be a firefighter. The hardest decision of all, because this is where I protect my own community." He says, Deputy Speaker, that Any claims such consultation has occurred with volunteers are false. He says it merely confirms the depths this government is prepared to go to in order to achieve its ends. My reaction to this is that I'm not going to waste my breath campaigning against it. Instead, I give up. That's where volunteers are at.
Members'
Deputy
time has
Speaker.
expired.